There is a photograph of you from when you were 2 years old. You have seen it. Maybe it sits in a frame. Maybe it lives in a drawer, or surfaces on a phone screen every few years while someone says, "Look how small you were." You know the child is you. Everyone agrees. The face is a rough draft of the one you are wearing now. But you do not remember that day. Not the room, not the light, not the person holding the camera, or what you were laughing at, or whether you were laughing at all. Most people assume the reason is obvious. The brain was too new, too undeveloped to hold anything. But the real answer is far stranger. That child remembered the day perfectly. That child remembered the room, the voice behind the camera, the texture of the carpet, what happened an hour before and what happened the week before that. Your memory did not fail to form. Something came later and took it. The name for what happened to you is childhood amnesia. It is the near total blank almost every adult carries over the first 3 years of life, and a thinning haze over the 4 years after that. It is not a disorder. It happened to you, to your parents, and to every person you have ever met. Sigmund Freud named it in 1899. He was puzzled that the years he considered most emotionally decisive were the years nobody could recall, and he decided the mind was hiding them on purpose, burying material too primal to look at directly. He was wrong about the cause. He was right that something strange was going on. Because the blank has a hard edge. Ask adults across the world for their earliest memory, and the answers cluster in the same narrow band, somewhere around 3.5. So what happens between 2 and 8 that removes the beginning of a person's life? Start with the thing that gets assumed and never checked. Can a 2-year-old actually remember? You have probably watched one do it. A toddler who has been to a beach once, 6 months ago, and still says the word for it when they see sand. A child who walks into a doctor's office they visited last winter and starts crying before anyone touches them. Patricia Bauer at Emory University built her early career on measuring exactly this. She would show very young children a short sequence of actions with unfamiliar objects, then bring them back weeks or months later to see whether they would reproduce it. They did. Children still in diapers, holding on to ordered sequences of events across long delays before they had the words to describe what they were doing. Carol Peterson at Memorial University of Newfoundland went further and studied children who had been through something unforgettable, injuries serious enough for an emergency room. She interviewed them afterward, then again years later. Children who were barely 2 at the time gave accurate, specific, verifiable accounts of what had happened to them. The recording device works. It works early, and it works well. So Peterson did the obvious next thing. She asked the same children about their earliest memories, then came back to them years later and asked again. The memories were gone. Not blurred. Not uncertain. Gone, and frequently replaced by a confident belief that their first memory was something else entirely, something later. Bauer ran the version of this that is genuinely unsettling. Working with Marina Larkina, she recorded 3-year-olds talking with their mothers about recent events, a trip, a birthday, a visit somewhere. Then she brought those children back at different ages and asked what they still had. The 5, 6, and 7-year-olds recalled most of it. Well over half. The 8 and 9-year-olds recalled far less, closer to a third. Read that again. The younger children remembered more. Bauer had caught the deletion in progress. The forgetting is not the failure of an infant to record. It is something that happens years afterward, quietly, while the child walks around with the memories still in hand. Somewhere around age 7, the file closes. So what closes it? The leading answer involves the strangest fact about your infant brain. It was under construction while it was running. Deep inside each temporal lobe sits a curled structure called the hippocampus. Think of it as an index rather than a library. It does not hold your life so much as keep the map of where the pieces are so they can be pulled back together on demand. In an infant, that structure is manufacturing new neurons at a furious rate. Neurogenesis, thousands of fresh cells wiring themselves into circuits that are already carrying information. Paul Franklin and Sheena Jocelyn at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto tested what that actually does. They trained infant mice to remember something, then artificially raised the rate of new neuron growth. The mice forgot. Then they ran it backwards. They suppressed neurogenesis in infant mice, and the young animals held on to memories they should have lost. Then they looked at species born in a more finished state, animals like the degu and the guinea pig, which arrive with far lower rates of new cell growth. Those animals do not show the same steep infant forgetting. The pattern holds: more new neurons, more forgetting. Picture a library where the shelves are still being installed. The books are there, the books are fine. But every new shelf shifts the others, and the catalog that told you where anything was no longer matches the room. Your earliest years were not lost to weakness. They were overwritten by growth. That is half of it. The other half is that you had no one to tell. Catherine Nelson and Robin Fivouche spent years studying how children learn to remember, and their conclusion reframes the whole thing. Autobiographical memory, the kind with a you in it, anchored to a time and a place, is not something a brain does alone. It is something a child is taught to do, out loud, by adults. Fivouche found that parents differ enormously in how they talk about the past with a small child. Some ask closed questions. Did you like the zoo? Yes. Done. Others elaborate. Who else was there? What did you see first? How did you feel when the elephant made that noise? And what happened after that? Children of elaborative parents end up with earlier first memories and richer ones. Not because they experienced more, because they were handed the structure that turns an event into a story, and stories survive. Which raises something you may not want to sit with. Is your earliest memory yours, or was it given to you? Chi Wang at Cornell pushed on this across cultures. She found that American adults report earliest memories roughly half a year earlier than Chinese adults and describe them differently. Longer, more detailed, centered on their own feelings and their own role in the scene. The memories reported by Chinese adults more often involved family routines and shared activity, with the self standing among others rather than in front of them. The blank does not lift at the same moment for everyone. It lifts when the culture around a child starts asking that child to narrate themselves. Your first memory has an accent. And now the part that turns all of this around. For a century, the assumption underneath the science was that infants simply do not encode. Nothing goes in. In 2025, a team led by Nick Turk-Brown at Yale did something people had been attempting for years. They scanned awake infants in an MRI machine while showing them images. When an infant's hippocampus lit up as an image went in, that infant was more likely to recognize the image later. The machinery was working. In babies under a year old, the memories went in, which means the blank in your life is probably not an absence of recording. It is a failure of retrieval. The traces may still be sitting there, laid down by a brain that had not yet learned to file anything under the word me, indexed by a system that was dismantled and rebuilt before you had language to search it with. You are not missing the footage. You are missing the way back to it. And when you do reach back, be careful what you trust. Elizabeth Loftus spent a career showing how readily human memory accepts material that was never there, including whole childhood events that can be planted in an adult by nothing more than a confident relative and a few repetitions. Jean Piaget, the developmental psychologist, carried a vivid memory of nearly being kidnapped from his pram as an infant. The crowd, the scratches on his nurse's face, the cape of the police officer who arrived. Years later, the nurse wrote to his family and confessed. She had invented the entire incident. Piaget had heard the story told so often that he grew a memory around it, complete with detail he could see. So try this. Bring up your earliest memory right now and notice the camera angle. If you can see your own face, if you are watching a small version of yourself from a few feet away, you are not replaying a recording. You are watching a reconstruction, assembled later out of photographs and family stories and reasonable guesses, because you were never standing where that camera is. Most people's earliest memories are shot from the outside. Here is what to do with all of it. The missing years were not the unimportant ones. They were when your nervous system learned whether the world answers when you cry. When your ear tuned itself permanently to the sounds of one language and quietly gave up the ability to hear distinctions in others. When the shape of how you attach to people, how you handle being left, how fast your body decides a room is safe, was drafted and set. You cannot recall a single day of it. You are running on all of it. There is a version of you who did the most consequential work of your life and left no account of it. No memoir, no testimony, just the finished behavior, still executing, in the way you flinch or settle or reach for someone when a room goes quiet. You have been calling this a loss. It may be the opposite. The forgetting is the receipt for a brain that refused to stay finished, that kept adding shelves and paid for every one of them with the room's old catalog. So look at the photograph again. There is a child in it who remembered that day. Who could have told you the room, the light, the voice behind the camera, what was funny and why? That child held those memories for years and then handed them over one at a time to build the person now holding the picture. There is a photograph of you from when you were 2 years old, and you do not remember the day, but everything you became that day is still standing in the room.